chapter in my book, which will get me started talking a little bit about my roots. And then we can talk about hers, and then we'll just sort of keep going from wherever we end up. Where we keep going. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Likewise.
All right. So this tiny little chapter, the second, trying to see that. Okay. Second chapter in my book is titled, first chapter is My Roots. And it's so interesting that Dr. Josie is here today because I start this chapter with something she said to me while we were working on her book. And she said it many times, and it's in the book. She said, let's leave tonight promising to tell our stories because we were not intended to survive. Dr. Joseph Johnson.
Okay.
So I was a small child when my parents divorced. My mother moved my three siblings to move from her home in Michigan to make a new life in Minneapolis, and my father moved his new family to Springfield, Massachusetts. Life is never easy for a single parent, and Mama was no exception. I always bristle when I hear white feminists talk about work as a privilege, because Black women have always had to work, often sitting in the houses of wealthy white women who were privileged to work outside their homes. In addition to cleaning houses, Mama also did piecework in a factory where she was paid according to the amount of work she produced. But even with two jobs, she had to resort to commodities such as government cheese and spam-like meat substance in order to keep food on the table. Even so, she kept our house spotless, made our clothes, kept us clean, and nursed us through our childhood illnesses. She found creative ways to stretch that tasteless government food, often inventing dishes she hoped you would enjoy, being sure to include healthy servings of fruit and fresh vegetables that she grew in the garden she kept on the side of the house. And she spent a lot of time in the hot summers canning so the produce from the garden could last through the cold Minnesota winter months. Like her mother before her, my mother wanted to be a hairstylist, and now my daughter is also a hairstylist. So that's a generational thing. So over time, my mother accomplished her dream in a much larger way than she had been when she was a young mother struggling to keep food on the table. She worked her way through beauty school and then went to work at Bree's Beauty Shop in South Minneapolis. The struggle continued for a while, but things got better after she started. I was about 12 years old when Mom and Barney married, and he brought his young son to live with us. The gentle and loving Barney was a terrific father and swept him. In his professional life, Barney Arleta was the first Black auditor for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And his real passion was music. He picked his left-handed finger Telecaster guitar and small combos, and also with a big band that played in the ritzy suburban Supper Club. We kids loved watching him when he sat on the couch quietly practicing his amplifier turned off so as not to disturb the family. And we enjoyed dancing around in time to the music when his friends came over to practice in the basement. It was unfortunate that in keeping with the times, Barney was forced to enter the supper club through the back door, while his white family was entering through the front door. While I was preparing for an estate sale after Mom and Barney passed away, I came across an obituary about him in an archived 1985 edition of Downbeat magazine. There, for the first time, the children learned that he had played with jazz legends Cab Calloway and Duke Ellington in his New York heydays in the 40s. Mom and Barney both had good heads for business, and together they opened Mama's first beauty salon, Joanna Salon of Beauty, on 48th and 4th Avenue in South Minneapolis at a time when the practice of redlining limited Black families from living and doing business in areas that were not as far south as that neighborhood. Later, after her first employer, B, passed away, they bought her building on the corner of 37th and 4th Avenue, and they turned it into a beauty school. Career Beauty Academy was the first African-American beauty school to ever exist in the state of Minnesota. Unfortunately, they were unable to sustain it for more than 5 years, but it was good while it lasted. But that did not stop my courageous mother. She opened another salon, and she accepted an invitation to start a cosmetology program in the Minneapolis Public Schools, a program that still exists at Edison High School. And when she was almost 60 years old, After she owned and operated her own beauty salons, own beauty school, and after she had started the program for the public schools, I proudly witnessed my amazing mother march across the stage in another auditorium at the University of Minnesota to accept the Bachelor of Science degree in vocational education, which she had earned. I come from a long line of role models, Black women entrepreneurs and educators. My maternal grandmother developed and sold a line of hair products after studying with C.J. Walker's rival, Miss Annie Turnbull Malone. And she taught her patrons how to use those products that she made. My great-grandmother, together with my great-grandfather, turned their home into a boarding house for African-American railroad porters in Lincoln, Nebraska. The porters, as we know, were not allowed to stay in hotels. I am proud to be the inheritor of my foremother's remarkable, enterprising spirit. And it's because of their legacy that I have been able to achieve as much as I have. So, yeah. I just wanted to say a little bit more about, it took me a while to realize that I had inherited that entrepreneurial spirit from the women in my ancestry. I got married, had 5 kids. Marriage wasn't, how to say it wasn't a good marriage, and I had to figure out how to get out of it. And we belonged to this little church down in North Carolina. I'm from here, but I moved down there with them. And one day the piano lady was sick, and I remembered the piano lessons that I used to take as a child. So I volunteered. Oh, Lord, why did I do that? I was terrible. Oh my God. But the people in the church kept encouraging me to practice and get better. And I started getting a little bit more confidence in myself because I had totally lost my confidence in the marriage. So finally I was able to, pack up, come back home to Minneapolis. Where I decided, I had always wanted to be a writer. And but places like where Arleta works now, the law back then were not accessible to a poor Black woman with children. And I just didn't have the bandwidth to go to college, go back to school because I was just too depressed. But I wanted my kids to know that just because we were broke and poor, that they did not have to stay in that condition. So I decided, well, I had really good secretarial skills in high school. So I decided I was going to start a home-based secretarial skills. And I rented a typewriter. I taught my kids how to type, how to proofread, and how to answer the phone properly. I put an ad in Minnesota Daily, and we were off and running. And eventually I bought myself a pink correcting selectric typewriter. It's one of the first things I ever owned. And because I always wanted to write, and I was also a single mom with these 5 kids, I had to do something to keep from going crazy. So I started writing little essays about them and about my life with them. And before I know it, my neighborhood newspaper, which was then the Whittier Globe, which was really a good paper back then, asked me if I would consider it being a column. So yeah, so I named it Diary of a Single Mom by Beatrice Mullins. And in addition to changing my name, I allowed my kids to name themselves. Ella named herself Gabby. I bet you don't even remember. Yeah. And, the column ended up getting 2 awards from the neighborhood press association. And I hadn't even taken a writing class by then. And, but I still wanted to learn. And the guy who was running Whittier Park back then, his name was Mark Sutera, he had all kinds of performing arts going on at the park. And so I went to him one day because my kid played at the park and really liked my kids. And I asked him if he'd consider a writing program. And he said, well, yeah, if you can find a teacher, I'll do it. And I said, okay, I'll find a teacher. Next thing I know, we're talking about the way the spirit leads things and how things just, for me, when I shed something, it doesn't happen. Then if I open myself up to it, wow. Next thing I know, my son Julian, who was my second born son, came home from school one day. He was in 5th grade, and he said that there was a poet in his school that day. And he overheard her telling his teacher that she needed someone to type her manuscript. So she told her to call me. And she did. And she's sitting in my dirty little house. And I asked her if she'd be willing to teach a creative writing class in a community center. And she said yes. And her name was Carolyn Holbrook. Some of you may have heard of Carolyn. Back then, she was a struggling poet who was teaching in the schools, the writers in the schools programs, which I didn't even know was a thing. I just knew that I knew what I needed. And she ended up teaching 2 6-week classes, which I thought was just going to be for, ladies in the neighborhood like myself. But I was working on class, people were lined up all around the block to take these classes. So she started introducing me to other teaching artists. And again, I'm off and running with this creative writing program. And I'm getting to take classes free because I was developing them by these really well-known, really good artists, teachers, and writers and teachers. So I was like, wow, okay, I guess I'll come with that. So I did for, I don't remember how long, 11 or 12 years, and then I went to work in the loft, which was not back then, a lovely place for me.
I'm glad you keep saying back then.
So many times, totally saying back then, girl, you got it going.
Yeah,
I am so glad you're there. Whoa.
standing on the shoulders.
Yeah. She has turned that place around to the point where I go there now and people are excited to be there. That wasn't the case. Not folks like us were not excited to be there some time ago, but they are now. Thanks to you and the way that you turn shit around. Turn things around. Yeah. So that was a tough thing for me. So I stayed there 5 years and I left. And on my way out the door, the person who was the BD back then asked me if I would go on the contract for about 6 months. I'll never ever do that again. When you leave someplace, please leave. That was one of the worst experiences of my life. But during the time, back then we didn't have email and all the stuff that we have now, the technology that we have now. So I kept getting phone calls from people who knew that I had a little place in the city park. And they asked me if I was whatever considered starting to get another organization. I said, no, I'm done. I am so done with this stuff. And I couldn't believe that the day after my last day, I got my energy back. So I called all those folks that had been calling me and asked them if they would help me start another organization. And I just happened at that point to be, I worked for Ideas to Go. I don't know if you guys have been on that, it's still around. There was an ideation center, and they would hire people, who they thought were smart and somehow thought I was smart. They would hire us to come in and do ideation sessions with big corporations and stuff to play with their products. And the guy was a really nice man. So I asked him if he would be willing to have it down here. It's over in San Antonio. If he'd be willing to have this ideation session to figure out what a new organization would look like. And he said yes. And the only ground rule was that we could not bash the law because everybody who was there was mad at the law. But he said no law bashing. Let's look instead about what we want to create. And we created this organization, which we decided to call SASE. I said SASE is a self-addressed deaf and below. Play on that because we wanted back then when we submitted to a competition company had to include a self-addressed deaf envelope. And if you got mad, then you didn't win. So the idea was with SASE, everybody wins. So that's my origin story for how I became a writer and an arts leader. And one more thing, and I'll turn it over to Arleta. How I started teaching was also another crazy thing that we used to have little readings at the park when I was at Whittier that we called, I forgot what we called it. It was something, I don't know. And one of our instructors asked me if I would come and teach or give it just a session with her class she was teaching at Turkish Arts School for the Arts back then. And she liked the way that I wrote dialogue. And I went, sure, yeah, okay. And I went there and the kids really didn't know what I was doing. And I thought, oh, I kind of like this teaching stuff. And then, at Whittier Park, there was this group of elderly psychics that used to hang out there on Sunday nights. And, I didn't know that that's what they were. I just saw a bunch of old folks sitting there. Well, now the fireplace. And I asked Laura, the guy who directed the he said, yeah, there are a bunch of subjects. So one day there was one of them. I said, oh, yeah. Hi. And this old man in a car named Carlos had this big accent. He said, you are a teacher. And I said, no, I'm not. I run the writing program. He says, you are a teacher. Someday you'll know. I kid you not. Some of this stuff happens. So in this crazy way. And next thing I know, I get a call from Hamlin University asking if I would sit on a panel about Black women writers. And I couldn't say no, but I was scared to death because, I still struggle with social anxiety and the imposter syndrome and all that stuff, but there's no way I can say no to that. So I'm sitting here with people like Rose Brewer, and she speaks right before me. She's so eloquent and I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And I got up to the podium and I said something. And I went catatonic. I swear. The chair of the energy department back then, she said during the Q&A, she asked me, what can you in university do for someone like you? Because I've been talking about my neighbor program and the kids and stuff. So she said, and I said, you can get your job. I didn't even think about it. I just said it. But, oh my God, next thing I know, I get an email from her or a call or whatever they had back then. This was in the late 90s, I think. And she asked me to come and speak with her. And I thought that she was just going to offer me $75 to teach her how to be diverse. Instead, she taught me how to write a syllabus. And I've been teaching ever since. I mean, I'm going to turn it over to our leader. That's enough about me.
No, good though. I mean, when you and I were getting together
I forgot my pen.
Discuss the framing this, we were just talking about how we both believe that we are participating in something larger than ourselves, that even our story is an extension of others' stories who have come before us. I've lived in Minnesota 30 years now. But I'm originally from the Washington, D.C. area. I was born there. And the reason I was there, and I'll tell you kind of my family background. I'm very pleased to have my mom here in the audience. Mom, as I say, I would not be who I am, or I could not do what I do without you. So thank you.
Give it up for Mama.
My mom's people come from Ohio and Pennsylvania. These are small towns. Often my relatives were working in factories on her side of the family. There are small towns with cemeteries full of weavers and Lloyds that are people on that side. Interestingly enough, there's always something in terms of diversity within a town. My grandmother was actually cut off from her family for marrying my grandfather because she was a Lutheran and he was a Methodist. My mom got out of a small town by studying to be a secretary. And she passed a government proficiency exam and made her way to DC to have her first job early in her 20s. And at that job, she met my father, Glenn Little. That side of the family, my grandparents were from a small town called Prairieville in Virginia. And the Littles are from Ador, North Carolina. In fact, one of the first times I met Alex Pate, he's like, Littles, are your people from North Carolina? And I said, yes, actually, they are. That's where that name comes from, North Carolina. My grandparents both grew up on farms on that side of the family, and they were eager to participate in the Great Migration and made their way from their small town communities to Washington, D.C. They were the first, they met each other. They were one of the first Black couples to integrate their block in Southeast Washington, D.C. And that block went through many changes over the course of their lives and mine. Once my parents met, I was born. They got married in 1970, only 3 years after the Loving versus the state of Virginia, where it was actually that was the law that struck down the prohibition against interracial marriage in the U.S. And that's significant for me because being biracial was a very defining part of my youth and even into college. And I came actually to Minnesota with the desire to write a book that would help me understand what it meant to be biracial and multiracial. But I'm jumping ahead. I was born in the Columbia Hospital for Women in Southeast Washington, D.C. And I will tell you, Duke Ellington was born there. Marion Barry was born there. Al Gore was born there. It's no longer open as a hospital, but pleased to ride on the shoulder of giants with that. The other thing that I'll just say about my youth, I went to Yorktown High School in Arlington, Virginia. And what's significant about that for me living here in Minnesota is that Paul and Sheila Wellstone also went to Yorktown High School. I went into college at Penn State. I was already interested in words. I received my first journal when I was in 4th grade. And my parents were only married for 5 years, or were together for 5 years. And I was an only child at that marriage. So I was very eager to write in my journal, to reflect on my thoughts, to talk to myself in that respect. So journaling really was the way that I made myself into the practice of writing. So by the time I went to college, I knew I was interested in communications. And when I found out that I could read all these books that I was interested in reading and get college credit as an English major, that was a done deal. I was like, what? I worked in bookstores. I worked in dining halls and part-time jobs while I was in school. But reading was my passion, and I was also very interested in how to exercise my voice on the page. I will tell you, all through high school, maybe into college, I had less than 5, maybe 3 Black teachers. Yeah, I was interested in making up some time in my graduate studies. Yeah, I think that's real. But my grandmother, was a significant influence on my father's side. And when I write about Black women in my life, I celebrate her. She really was a profound presence. It broke my heart when I lost her in 2010. We lost her. After college, I went to Peace Corps pretty directly. I was very religious as a young person, talking about the movement of the Spirit. I remember being 15, going on 16. I went to church with my friend Nikki, and it was a Pentecostal church. And I was hungry. I was hungry to be that alive. And I went out when the minister called, and it significantly redirected my interest. I had already been exploring the Bible. And in fact, that time in your life, like 13, 14, when your faculties of reason start to kick in and you understand things. I remember looking at the pages in the Bible and it just being like a concrete wall. I don't understand what is happening. But in that developmental phase, the Bible was one of the first books where I started to read and see metaphor. I started to understand the significance of history. I started to understand the movements of people across geographies, and the beauty of language, right, was also part of it. So I fell deeply in love, and very serious about Christianity, probably from the age of 16 to 22, very formative years. But one of the things I noticed during that period of my life was, as a woman, I always felt called to lead. I don't know, being an only child, and I didn't have models within Christianity of women, being strong leaders, like from the pulpit or running the church. My grandmother was a deacon, and that was a significant part of, or a deaconess, and that was a significant part of her service in the church. And there were things like they started accrediting me in the context of their church. So I got some insight about economics, and self-empowerment, and the ways in which people were doing that. But let me get on to Minnesota. I knew I didn't want to go back to DC after I had taught English in the Peace Corps. That really was the first time I practiced as a teacher. I had 4 classes of 50 students each. That's 200 kids that I worked with for over 2 years. And
what country?
In Thailand. Yeah. And it was they say the Peace Corps is the toughest job you'll ever love. And it was hard to be that far away from home. I was the only foreigner in my small town of 300 and some people. It was a farming village. And some friends, as we were approaching the end of our time in Peace Corps, I was just talking out loud about not necessarily wanting to go back to DC. It was very expensive to try to start a life there. It was very political, of course. And it was also very violent when I was growing up. In DC, they used to start the news with the murder count for the day when I was growing up. And I was just like, there must be some other folks. Now, I didn't know Minneapolis was also known as murder at that time. But I was talking out loud, and a good friend of mine who had been from the Midwest, she said, I was saying, I don't think I want to go back there, but I don't know where I want to go. And I know I can't just go anywhere because I need Black people. And she said, well, have you thought about Minneapolis? And I said, well, I knew she was from there. So, and all I knew about Minnesota, it was north and cold. I really didn't know. And the first question I asked was, are there any Black people there? And she said, yes. She said, the mayor. And I just had a chance to tell Sharon this story. I said, Sharon, you don't know your role in my Minneapolis origin story. Just had a chance to tell her the story. She said, the mayor and Prince. Yeah. And I did love me some Prince. So she got me here to visit in July, and we went to the gym. We went to the art shows. We checked out all the parks, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And all the Star Tribune at the time, I knew I needed to get a job, had like 7 sections of job ads. See, I'm dating myself. A newspaper had 7 sections of job ads. And I said, okay, sure, I can get a job here. I ended up moving here in 1996. And my goal was to get a job as a writer. So I went to one of these part-time places, and there was one job available. They had it as a tech writer for a computer software company. And I said, oh, okay, all right. And the company was for the 44th floor of the IBS. And I found myself from a fishing village in Thailand working for a computer software company. And this was just as the internet was being born. I remember being in Thailand with having a conversation with some of my Peace Corps buddies, and we were trying to we all got the same Newsweek magazine, and there was a computer on the front of the Newsweek magazine. And we were like, this email, what is it? I think it's like a letter that you write, and it goes through the computer, and you have to have a computer, and I would send it through the computer, and you would get it. And we're like, oh. because the internet was just, it was just coming online, right? Yeah. My first job here in Minneapolis was as a tech writer at a computer software company, and it gave me some exposure, not only an immediate immersion into technology in that time, but it also let me know I didn't want to work with computers. As soon as I could, went back to school for social work. I knew I wanted to study to be a clinician, and I went to St. Thomas for my master's. During that time, I realized I actually was very good at applying clinical analysis to organizations, even better than with people. I got a part-time job working at a place called Boulder Options. Boulder Options is a youth mentoring program that paired adults with youth to bike and run. And in that time, they were also, it was like a Big Brothers, Big Sisters, but with an emphasis on motion and activity at the same time. The reason that is important is because Daryl Thompson, who ran Boulder Options, was a good friend and had been recruited to the U to play football by Ezell Jones. And Ezell is one of the patron counsel for the Gibbons Collection, and is essential to my origin story with the Gibbons Foundation. Because after I had been consulting for a while, I went to an annual event for Boulder Options and was sat at a table with Ezell. And he said, "What are you doing right now?" And I said, "Oh, I have this business where I'm writing grants and doing strategic planning, and I do a little bit of program evaluation." He said, "Give me your card." And he said, I wanna let you know about this organization called the Gibbons Foundation. I had heard of the Gibbons Foundation because earlier that year, they brought Angela Davis to town. And she'd spoken at the Sheraton in downtown. I was at that time, after graduating, after graduate school, I got a job at the YWCA, and we talk about jobs that don't work. Oh my gosh. They hired me as a director of development and marketing at that time, and I was not ready for that culture, or that specific job. And so I left after about 10 months. And that's when I bumped into Ezell. Now, when I left, the leadership team gave me this card, and on the cover of this card was a crest of, like, it was Phyllis Wheatley. On this card, they all written and signed in the interior of this card. And when I got it initially, I was like, "Oh, this is really amazing." But I had such heartbreak from that job and having to leave that job because it wasn't a good fit. I just took everything related to that job and put it in a drawer. And I didn't touch it for like a year. In the meantime, bumped into Ezell. Ezell called me after I'd given him my card, and he said, "You know what? The managing director of the Gibbons Foundation is leaving." He said, "So anyway, I told them that you're into grant writing and development." He said, "But the managing director's leaving, so I put your name in for that too. So you're going to be hearing from," it was Margaret Hassey. "You're going to be hearing from Margaret Hassey, who was board member at the Gibbons Foundation at that time. And she's going to set up a meeting with you and Archie Gibbons and Dr. Josie Johnson." And I had never met Archie or Josie at that time. But I tell you, when you talk about days that change your life, the trajectory of your life, once the meeting was set, I showed up, and there were Josie and Archie were sitting at the table, and they had my resume in front of them, and I sat down, and one of the first things Josie said to me as she was looking over my resume, and she was just like, "You don't look old enough to have done all these things." And the rest related to Gibbons is history. Some of my most cherished work memories are at the Gibbons Foundation. Having been a co-founder of the Gibbons Black Writers Retreat, a very influential program here in the Twin Cities. But so much of my work has been collaborative, just as you three organizations are collaborating. The Black Writers Retreat really came about because Elena Scope had been to a similar retreat in New York, and she had moved from Atlanta to the Twin Cities, and she was like, "We've got to have a Black Writers Retreat here in the Twin Cities," and she was looking for somebody to partner with. Now, one of my first meetings after Archie and Josie decided to take a risk on me, Archie had me go to a meeting with someone I hadn't met, and they were trying to figure out a way to get more resources to Black writers. That meeting was with Cindy Garrett from the Jerome Foundation. And we sat down and we were brainstorming ideas because Gibbons was interested in putting a program together to support Black writers. And I had evolved a retreat and meditation practice. But Elena had convened Black leaders within the community to really try to figure out what should this look like. And so, Beverly Cotman was at that meeting. And she said to Elena, "You need to talk to our leader, the Gibbons Foundation, because they're trying to think about, how to serve Black writers as well." So these are the ways in which the spirit moves, right, through our lives. It's not like I started at Gibbons and said, "We need to start a retreat program." No, Elena had a seed of an idea. We were trying to meet a need in the community. A funder wanted to pour into writers in the community at the time. And thus was born the Gibbons Black Writers Retreat Program, and it ran based on NOMO, which Dabu talked about, where national writers came. We would pair local writers with those national writers. Some of the first writers were Mary Baraka, paired with James Powell. Sonia Sanchez was the second writer, paired with Carolyn Holbrook. Yeah, Ishmael Reed we brought to town. He paired with Lori Carlos. Alex was paired with Patricia Smith. I mean, it was such a beautiful and dynamic program. It's one of the joys and real proud, very proud of it. But that program was funded by McKnight. I was with the foundation for the Gibbons Foundation for about 8 years, and then McKnight had an opening as an arts program officer and director for their fellowship program. And I transitioned there to work for another very influential person in my life, Vicki Benson, who is also here today. Vicki and I sat down. Now, I have been trying to get funding for the retreat program, and McKnight wouldn't fund us. One of the first conversations I ever had with Vicki, I was mad. And I said, "What? We are doing the work out here in this community, and why won't you fund us? I mean, I didn't have anything to lose. They weren't funding us." And she said, "Wait a minute, we just had some changes in our guidelines. Why don't you apply?" Yeah, they did end up offering additional support in conjunction with Jerome for the program. But McKnight, when they had this position open, Vicki was my first boss there, and a true mentor to me over the time that I worked within philanthropy. Always had influence. He was always wrong in many ways, that so much capital should be in so few hands, and the decisions not made by community. I worked at McKnight for 8 years. Was a program officer for the Loft, and after 8 years, transitioned to the Loft, to my current work. Yeah, one of the projects that I'm most excited about in the work at the Loft is the establishment of the Minneapolis Poet Laureate Program, which is another collaborative project. Yes. And that was, a dream in the mind of Andrea Jenkins, who had been a Gibbons retreat writer. She's in the photo that was up earlier, and very interested through her work on the city council in really setting the arts deep into civic infrastructure. And a poet laureate program is one way in which we can do that. So Yeah, I'll pause there if we bring up, yeah, and if you go to the retreat, yeah, that's me as a writer. Yeah, page three. Yeah, Carolyn, Josie, and I. Yeah, that's the picture that makes me say I came into the world as a writer. Yeah. And then if you go to the retreat,
Forward.
yes, right
Okay,
there.
yeah.
I don't know if you'll see many people that you recognize in this photo. Here's Elena Scope in terms of working collaboratively with a dream, right? Teotis Powell, dear friend and mentor, Andrea Jenkins, Nika, Carolyn Wage, Sherry Fernandez Williams, Brenda Bell Brown, Louis Rush, who may have been working at Jerome Foundation at that time. Shay and E.G. It was quite, this is Amiri's son. Yeah. Yeah, this was such an amazing launch cohort for the retreat program. Yeah. And then in terms of other collaborative work, Pamela Fletcher and Takuma Aiken and I worked on Black Swallowtail, I want to say for a good 4 years together. It was a poem that I had. These were images that Takuma already had, and the collaboration really was in the music and the jazz of pairing the two. And so this is the book that was born of that collaboration as well. So there we go. Yeah, there's one other thing I wanted to shout out. In terms of my life as a writer here in Minnesota, I participated in SASSY's program. Angela Shannon was my mentor as part of that program. And you were a host for a thing called a Revolutionary Women's Cabaret. And a woman that I worked with as when I was learning how to write grants for a small company called Serious Communications. One of my coworkers was Monkway and Josie. Yes. And she was the MC, I believe, for the Revolutionary Women's Cabaret and had invited me to read and reflect on the work of Lucille Clifton as part of that event. And whoosh, Lucille Clifton is one of my literary ancestors that gave me permission to try to be a poet. Yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah, I'm normally not a poet, but Lucille Clifton is the one that I believe in my own personal literary ancestor. And speaking of Cindy Garrett and Vicki Benson, oh my goodness, Cindy has always been a champion. You know, when I was even doing that little program in the community center in South Minneapolis, you know what she did? We started the first ever Black mentoring program in the city, in the state of Minnesota, thanks to funding by the Jerome Foundation, because Cindy Garrett was just really wanting, well, you can tell us, you know, she's just really, you know, a big person who wanted to make sure that equity was happening and people were getting what they needed and as far as writing and the arts went. And then when I started SASSY, Cindy was there again. We started the first ever grants for spoken word in the country at SASSY. They were small, they were $5,000, but they happened. And then we started also with the Jerome Foundation funding, the program, you know, the mentoring program that we had. We called it Writer to Writer because we wanted to work in small groups with people to work in small groups with a mentor. Because we felt, and I still feel that way, that you get much more with people in a long-term project if you're in a smaller situation and you can go deep rather than broad. And she said, yeah, I'm there. And she's always been, and she's sitting here today. Yeah. Yeah. And now, speaking of Vicki and the Ignite Foundation and Arleta, now the spoken word grants that we started at SASSY with a small 5,000 grant are one of the Loft Ignite Awards. And there's one every year, I think.
Every other year for spoken word.
Spoken word that they get 25,000. So, yeah. And she mentioned Alex Peake. I've always been just really interested and wanting to collaborate with other people. And Alex Pate was our mentor for the first Black mentoring program. And, that was interesting because, he was from Philly and had already been involved in a group that was like really doing it. And we weren't aware of what each other's needs. And I needed someone to mentor, up and coming Black writers, and he needed a group of peers. But, we are still really good friends. And you learn so much when you work with other people. You learn who they are, you learn more about who you are. I can't say enough about the importance of partnering with people. So I had this little office, Sassy, we had this little office on the third floor side in the 7-Eleven building, off of Glendale and Lake Street, when I had Sassy. And I don't know if you guys, some of you might remember the Julius Hughes, who started the Black Film Festival in the Twin Cities. His office was down the hall from mine. I always knew when Julius was coming because he had this really specific, his footsteps were like his own. And I'm listening one day and I'm hearing Julius come down the hall. I knew he was going to stop at my office. And he did. He never says hello. He never said goodbye. He just went in and he said, "Hey, I'm in Shirley Love Jones. You want to partner with me?" When Love Jones first came out, and I said, "Yeah." So I called, she mentioned Shay and E.G. I called E.G. Bailey, who was at that time involved. What's the name of the group at the Walker that they were, group with him and Kirk Washington? And I don't remember the name of the group, but I was really impressed with these guys. And so I contacted E.G. and I said, "So Julius wants me to do something with Love Jones, and I want you to be." And so he wanted me to do it. I said, "I don't know, you figure it out." No, that's really important to just let people, give them agency and let them hear. And what he came up with was he got together with Bonnie and Dorsey and what was her name? She's a dancer and choreographer from Zimbabwe. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
We talk, we know we're talking. And a couple of other people. And they put together this amazing show that they put on at he showed the movie at, I want to say the theater that's on
Parkway Theater.
48th in Chicago. And after it was done, he showed the movie, Love Jones. And so many people came up to me later and said, "Wow, this made me feel like I can be a poet," because it made me feel like poetry was accessible to them. Not not just some big high art that, was recruited. And so I started this program called the Sassy About Town Readings, where we had readings in coffee shops, which, is not a new thing now, but back then it was pretty new. And, I would just, whoever wanted to, to have a monthly poetry reading in their coffee shop or in their neighborhood, I give them I have a couple of books that I could give them. And it was so great because again, people got to see that poetry it's for everybody. And this one, I'll never ever forget this as long as I'm Black. We had one and what was called the Blue Moon Coffee Shop was now Melbourne Coffee Shop on Big Street. And so this woman, what's her name? She's a body worker. She's white, but she and her husband always showed up at these things. And at this, I think she was one of the scheduled readers of this one. And her husband was just, you could tell he just wanted to read, he wanted to say something. And so I told him, "Come on up." He says, "I don't have anything, I just got a can of soup here." I said, "Okay, then read the can of soup. Read the ingredients." And that brother got up there and he read the hell out of that. Out of a can of soup. So this is everything that you can't make. This is a quote by Octavia Butler that I just use all the times from Parable of the Sower. She says, "Sometimes writing about a thing makes it easier to stand." And I live by that. And I try to, teach that to students too. And, because it's really true. Writing is so healing and so important for our being. Yeah, so thank you, Vicky. And Cindy, Cindy and Vicky, thank you guys for just being you and being here. Wow. What else? Where do you want to go next?
Well, we can talk about how, I described our relationship as a double helix. And,
Oh.
So first of all, we're both left-handed.
yes. And even I was trying to think about once I started at Gibbons Foundation, we also had an interest in launching an education program. And Carolyn was the one that we reached out to inaugurate that program, to study it, to think about what it needed to look like. There were other comparable programs around town, but they did not work with Black teaching artists and Black curricula and Black books. And Carolyn really pulled that together for us and launched it. So the things I'm proud of. Yes, yeah, deservedly so. And let's see, then I think probably the next really significant touch between us, I had gone on a trip. There were four of us, women who had talked to me about wanting to write their life stories. One of them was Barbara Shin. One of them was Sarah Roberson. Whose papers I also helped to get into the Gibbons collection here at the university. And the third person was Josie Johnson. And I said to these three women, all three of you, we knew each other and had deep roots in education work here in the state. But all three of them, I said to them, you all have talked to me about wanting to write your story. Let's go on retreat. I love taking people. Let's go on retreat to the Dwelling in the Woods, where we had launched the Gibbons Black Writers Program. And each of you will have your own hermitage. Bring your books, bring your notes, bring whatever it is that you want to grow into was going to be your story. And sure enough, the four of us, we got into two cars, we journeyed up to the Dwelling in the Woods. Each of us had our own hermitage, and Josie had brought boxes. She brought boxes of stuff, as did Sarah. And there was a huge snowstorm that weekend. It must have been, I think there was 5 feet of snow on the ground. But we were locked in with the material, right? So I think that's really where Josie's story kind of moved from. I want to write my story, I want to write a book, or other people actually wanting Josie to write her book to actually begin to kind of pull it together. The other thing was that the collection, Cecily Marcus, who was the curator at the collection at the time, was very interested in having Josie's papers come into the collection. And so Josie was interested in having some help in organizing her papers. And so I volunteered. We were already meeting regularly because she was the chair of the board at the Gibbons Foundation. And as part of our work together, I started to bring office boxes, to our meetings. And I would say, okay, how are we gonna do eight decades of materials? I just ended up making a box for each decade and say, Josie, as you encounter things, what decade of your life is irrelevant, and put it in that box. And for many years in Josie's dining room, there were office boxes stacked with decades listed on them while she was gathering those materials. And then eventually she and I started to meet and record our conversations with the idea of working the material into a book. During the midst of that process, I decided to change jobs. And I knew that when I started at McKnight, it was going to be way too much for me to try to write a book with Josie, start a new job and learn a whole new field. And so we started talking about hiring a writer to work with us to write Josie's story. We had already mapped out the decades, a lot of the content for the chapters. And Carolyn Holbrook was the person that we talked about and brought in must have been 2013. We started to have an initial conversation. We had talked with the University of Minnesota Press, and they were very interested in seeing what they call is a kind of what do you call it, book sample, where you sell your chapters in a book. And so that's originally how we got started. Josie was very interested in telling the story about her work at the university. And Carolyn and Josie worked to draft kind of those first 3 chapters. But when we sent it to the university, they were like, this is important. We want to know that your academic work, but what we really want to know is your story, your whole, who you are as a person. And that was a reframe. Yeah.
One of the most interesting projects I've done, because it was so fun, because Josie, people like Josie, there aren't very many like Josie, but they're more, they're always feeling they don't have an opportunity to stop and reflect. And I wanted to just allow her to do that. And at first she kind of
and to value it.
Right. Asked me about what?
Right.
And I said, no, I'm gonna take my time with this, because we need to get her whole story, as Eric and our editor said. So I would go to Josie and I'd say, and she had told me, in passing, because she's talking and I'm listening, and I would, sort of glom onto one thing. I'll come back from that. I said, Josie, why would you wear that purple dress back there? And she, how are you asking me a question like that? I went back the next week, she's got 10 pages about, what happened the day that she wore that purple dress. And that's how I was able to gradually pull that story out of her. It turned out to be this.
Yes.
And there's no Josie Johnson. Thank you for letting us do this. And me and our leader fought throughout it, and we got it done.
Yeah, like 8 years.
I told our leader during our meeting a couple of weeks ago that, I kind of think of her as a sister, because we fight like cats and dogs. But if I hear anybody else say about her, man, don't mess with my sister. But we have a really powerful.
That's true. Well, and one of the things that we talked about as we were working on that project together was that we were representing 3 generations of Black women, and generations that had different ways of negotiating the system or bucking the system, right? And so we had different ideas about, how do you represent, how do you talk about change? And the role of Black women in change, and also different how to articulate different leadership styles, which there's been in terms of women in leadership. It is that you don't have to be like a man to be an effective leader, but the times had to change, too, for those things to be really valued. So we had such, I remember at the beginning of the project saying I could go to the U and get my PhD because I was interested in doing that, or I could help Josie write her book. And I helped Josie write her book. And let me tell you, it was all that much more of an education. Oh, it's so incredible. If you haven't read it, please buy it today.
We need to allow time for questions.
You.
Anybody have questions or comments?
You're gonna mic after you run. You probably like to ask questions better than somebody does, but we'll put it.
Want to use this one?
Question.
I'll start. First off, wonderful to see you both. I'm grateful to be here and hear your stories. Parts of them I haven't heard before. My question is this: as I was listening to your story and the foundation of origin, one of the things that has been a real challenge for me is being an adoptee and often feeling like my origin story is something that I have to prove as being an adoptee, multiracial, raised in a multiracial family, with other adopted siblings who I'm not biologically related to, and we're all different races. So there's a lot there, but it always feels very disjointed to me. So that's something that I struggle with when I read other stories. And I think there's a question emerging here, but I'm okay with not necessarily knowing what it is at the moment.
Can you read something in response to that?
Have you read Shannon Gibney's what is it called? The Girl
Oh, yeah.
No. It's a memoir. It's sort of, she calls it a speculative memoir.
Yes.
Yeah, well, part of it is she's talking about her life, part of it she's speculating on, what her life would have been otherwise. And I had, a Chinese translational adoptee said to me a few years ago that she thinks adoptees are the best storytellers because they're always having to make their lives up. So, and you have the freedom to tell your story, whatever it is, and however it feels to you. Yeah. And I hope you will. I hope you can.
I've got little bits and pieces.
The loft has a year-long program. I'm going to be back doing it in summer 2027. Remember me. I think Sun Young is all there.
So, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I said I came to Minnesota and to write a book, and the first book that I wrote actually was my master's thesis about multiracial identity. And I needed to write that because nobody could give it to me. And in that kind of authoring myself, it was very healing and established a foundation. Part of the transition is you're going from what the world tells you, your tragic story, you're constantly divided, to naming yourself. And that progression, yeah, that's a healing journey.
Just knowing you own it.
So, at this point in life, as I got older, I wanted to take the writing out into the world and more. Been journaling since third grade when a teacher introduced it to me and have never stopped, but haven't really known how to get it out and thought I wanted to be, actually do. I said I want to be a fiction writer, but every time I turn around, it ends up being nonfiction. And just, where would you suggest? I mean, I get to see so many beautiful people in the community when I'm around, but I've never really been mentored. And sometimes I feel like time is going, but what if this is a time now, this stage in my life, to really launch out?
You are in the right place. You are in the right place. The work that's being done by More Than a Single Story, plenty of programs to apply there. The books that are being published and the work that's happening in Black Ink, the resource that is available to you through the Givens collection, all you have to do is make up your mind about what you're going to do. Yeah. You have everything you need in this room. And if you don't find it there, talk to me about the law. I can tell you about what we have.
Our Go Back and Fetch It mentor program, which is also funded by the Knight Foundation, the Jerome Foundation. Sorry, y'all. But we'll be setting out the guidelines in May.
I think there's a fear around it sometimes.
Excuse me?
I think that's what it is. I think there's a fear around it.
Oh,
Be
yeah.
accepted, at this stage. But
Oh, I still have this.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah,
So do I.
that's just part of being a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can just accept that, pick it up, keep writing.
Is that a time? Oh, go ahead.
Hi, this is so inspiring. My name is Dr. Teresa Hardaway. I teach here at the U, and I also own Black Garnet Books, where we are specific about Black and brown. So my question is really about, as a published author myself, about the publishing industry. And you all are really focused on telling our narratives, making sure our stories are being told. What are the things that you have run up against with working with these publishers who you don't represent our people, and making sure that our story stays true to story without them questioning, taking stuff out, editing this, like what are the ways that you all have pushed against that in the industry?
I mean, in this time, self-publishing is booming.
Yes.
The opportunity to publish your own work is huge. And the Twin Cities is just rich with opportunity. You know, I see Mary here also who does work in publishing. Mary, yeah. Who does work in publishing as well as Raquette. But the first thing I want to say is your story is yours. So empowering authors with agency to advocate for themselves, I think is where some of how that change happens within publishing. And then owning the means of production. You know, if nobody is willing to tell your story, be willing to tell it yourself. And that's part of the work of being a successful author as well, is that business part. You know, of how do I get my story to the world if that's what you're compelled to do. Yeah, I've been very fortunate also. For me, it's not an either or, because a lot of institutions and systems are changing, and I've been very intentional about participating in that, because I'm like, the infrastructure is here. It just needs to be brought true to our community. So that's part of it. For me, it's a both and. We need to change the systems as they exist, and we need to establish new ways of doing things on our own terms.
And I want to add to that, you know, whoever you work with as a publisher, whether it's self-published or not, the editor is the most important person in your life.
Relationship, that's right.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if you work with an editor who wants to change the story to the point where it's no longer yours, run like hell. And at the same time, if your book is not well edited, it's not going to work. So whether you decide to self-publish or whether you're working with an established publisher, make sure that above all else, you have a good editor. Because a book, I believe this with everything that's in me. A book is only as good as its editor. Okay? So just make sure that you're working with the right people.
Can I just share a little bit about working with you as an editor?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, most of the work that I published, exactly, in Waterstone, that was up on the screen too.
Yeah, thanks.
Most of the work I published was poetry. So my inclination as a writer is to condense down, to find the right word, to use as few words as possible. And Carolyn, when she was your primary editor,
I was
guest
a
editor
for
for Waterstone Review, invited me to submit an essay. And, you know, I would send her a few pages and she would just say, open this up, tell me more here, give me more. And I say, okay, I go back and I write a little bit more and I send it, give me more, I need more. And it was just like having someone that encourages your work to breathe, to take an inhale, to add, to bring it to life. You know, that relationship, I think, is key ultimately to what work is birthed into the world. And it's a collaborative process, even when the story is yours.
Yeah, and I think that's true whether you're publishing an academic work or literary work. It's still the same story. You have to have a good editor, one who encourages you to open that story up, let it breathe, become the story that you wanted to tell. I have one experience in an anthology that I'm published in, that the editor just the story didn't end in a nice neat little bow, because a lot of our stories don't. Life is not like that. And she kept saying, well, don't you want to end it like this? And I said, well, I said, no, this is the way my story was. And we went back and forth, and if your editor is willing to sit and talk with you and go back and forth, try to understand your thought process as well, That's also really important. Of course, I won because she went out and never told me that if it wasn't what I wanted. And then in another anthology that I'm in, it's so interesting. I have this piece, it's in my memoir, I think. And there's this one section that was really important to me. And so I showed it to an editor and she said, yes, I'll publish it if you take that out. And I started thinking, well, there's this thing about kill your darlings. Was I really too attached to this section that really didn't work? And I thought about it and I showed it to another editor and I didn't mention anything about this. He said, oh, I love this piece, especially that part. So he published it and I told the other one,
The other thing I'll say, if you know a writer that you respect, who's been published, ask them who the editor was and what their advice might be for getting in touch with that press. Yeah.
And they always read the acknowledgments in a book because the writer always acknowledges their editor, their publisher, and other people who were beta readers or part of the writing group or whatever. Yeah, so there's help. There's help out there for all of us. I got my PhD at the age of 58, so you should shut up.
Okay.
It's time for me to go.
Well,
Genesee, I'm sorry, Genesee.
yeah, I have so many thoughts, it's hard to come up with a concise question. But I was having a conversation with my son before I got here. And we were talking about so many people of our generation and older coming from the Black identity are focused on like the striverism. And when we try and push young people forward, it's like you're going to get this good professional job or whatever. And actually, then had to take off. But he talks about entrepreneurs. But I like talking about scholarship. And he's like, where are our scholars and where are our artists? And Arleta, you were talking about being torn between, helping Josie with her project and doing the PhD. It's like, what do we do to sort of change the talk that we give? Like, we need people, especially now, who are going to tell the truth about our identity. So we don't need, well, we need accountants and lawyers and stuff like that. But we need to be able to say who we are. And how does the work that you're doing try and encourage that, including getting more Black publishers and editors?
Roni said, you are the truth. Now, what else do you want to know? So you tell your own story, you get a big person to help you work with it, a big group of people. I have a really good writing group. Oh, you know, good writing group. Right on. I started. Good, yeah. So, my writing buddy, who's a native one, Diane Wilson, we've been writing buddies for over 30 years. And we've been in different groups together, and some worked and some didn't. And when we finally decided, we're gonna put our own group together. And we've been with this group of 6 for almost 10 years now. Some of the people that support you, that tell you what's not working, how it can work. People who are just really real and honest and loving. People, I'm sure we've all been in groups we want to go kind, and that doesn't help at all. Away from your question. I'm sorry.
No, one of the things that was clear to me in my work at McKnight Foundation, supporting artists, both through the fellowships program and through our general programming, was that artists very rarely just do one thing. They almost always are doing multiple things, including having jobs, and often jobs that they also care about. So I can I hear job. So one of the things about an artist's identity is often that they have cobbled together some way to make it through this life. And writing is one of the things they're doing. Working at an administrative position is one of the things they're doing. I have had my eye on Kevin Young for a long time. there was a point at which Kevin Young was like the editor for the poetry section at the New Yorker. He was the executive director at the Schomburg. He had just published a book, Bunk, and was touring the country talking about, I'm like, I want to be Kevin Young. Is he getting all this work done? And so figuring out like, and what are the support systems that allow, that type of productivity.
How do we cultivate those spaces?
That's right. Right. Or the idea that we can do more than one thing.
And we really can. We do it all the time.
Exactly.
Tennessee. All right,
So
so
speaking of writing groups, so this is.
yes, so I do have a question. I have something to offer, so I want to do that. And I want to do that in light of what the questions that have already been asked and thinking about the personal journey of figuring out what is your story and the journey of figuring out is it too late to tell my story? Yeah. The scale of what does it look like to be trying to tell your story, help other people tell their stories, and the things that come up and all the responses that you all are given because of the way that the two of you have influenced me. And as an alum of the Givens Writers Retreat, I think you've all helped to save my life in a way. And when I did the retreats, it sounds like I was like the second year. It was, I don't know, I was in your year, and I think I got in about a seat my teeth. I really don't even know what happened, but I was however old I was, and I didn't think I could call myself a writer. So to the point of tier two points, I didn't think I could, even though it's a part of who I am. It's a part of my origin. It's a part of my lineage. It's what I've inherited. But I didn't think I could say that. I didn't think I could name myself that. And the retreat gave me the space to do that. And the two of you being present and watching the journey that you all have been on and being where I've been that little dormant, and the spaces that you brought me in. And so I want to offer thanks for that. And I want to do that in a way, like I said, that connects to the questions that were asked. And to just affirm that it is very true that you get to say what is true for you. And that the practice of writing, and I think especially you, Ms. Holbrook, like you gave me the permission to just be present as a writer and have a practice that is mine. And that wasn't about trying to reach for opportunities, even though you literally brought me into rooms, big rooms, small rooms. One time at the Muddy Pig, sitting there, having sharing a plate of chicken with a national writer, like, and the point I'm trying to make here, and the thing that I want to offer back is it isn't about aspiring to have, it's about a practice for yourself. And there may be other things that come from that. There may be ways to share publicly. There may be ways to put that story together. But it is your inheritance to tell your stories. That is what you inherit by being alive, by being present. It's what you inherit from your family. It's what you inherit from the people who made you. And those people are not, I don't think they have to be the people that you share biology with if you cannot access that. I don't think it has to be in a certain time. And I think the example that you've given in telling Dr. Joseph Johnson's story, you said 8 decades. You said 8 decades. 8 years.
Not
8 years.
He lived
Exactly. It was 8 years to cover 8 decades. There is no time. And even though we get the pleasure and the honor of having that story publicly, you all discuss the work that it took to do that and what it did for you over that time. And that work had to happen regardless of who got to see it, even though we are blessed to have that. And so I just want to offer that back. And I want to say thank you. And I want to say thank you for what you've given to me. And it reminds me that it doesn't matter what I have done, haven't done. It doesn't matter the journey that I've been on. I am still a writer. I am still a Black woman writer every single day of my life. And it is what I do. And it is because of you too that was able to come to the forefront in a way that affirms what was given to me before I made you.
So how many times have I said to you, when I'm reading your Facebook posts, save those?
And I have been doing good. Because
Because you be telling me.
I have been saving you. Thank you, Jess.
Okay. I'm gonna call that done. You tear a hole in the fabric of the universe like that, you just gotta pause. So thank you, sir. Oh, was there a
Your name is Control. We appreciate it so deep. And it doesn't have to be. We just want to acknowledge your presence here if you visit us. Let me just say, I feel blessed. I feel that blessing offers support. It also reminds us of our children and from which they have come, and what our role as an adult and as a parent means. And for us as elders to get together and honestly feel okay about being an elder and inviting the words and wisdom of our young. And I think we don't do enough of that sometimes to really make them feel how they feel and what they think, what they can share. And we as elders need to listen. We need to open our eyes as wide as we can. And we need to try and share. Sometimes I think adults don't share with the younger, and that we need to do that to know that the world is very diverse. Our experiences are very diverse. And there is no one set that's more important than another set. That it's all a collection of who we are and what we pass on. And I admire you young people. And those of you on the stage whom I've known probably all your lives, what it means to share honestly, openly, without fear or confusion. I thank God every day for having lived this long and pray that I'm able pass on to our children collectively what it means to be who we are in this society, what our responsibilities are. No lecture, my friend. To be here and to have lived as long as I have with the environment that I grew with. So thank you very much. God bless you.
Dr. Joseph helped me embrace my ownership. My daughter as a hairstylist will tell you, I used to color my hair red, purple, everything to try to avoid what I have now until you know what? I like it.
Yes.
Watching Josie is so beautiful. And you know what? I can do anything but beautiful if I just let it. That's it. So, thank you.
So our time will run out, they're gonna kick us out. Relax, take your time. I would invite you again to come and see some of the materials from the Gibbons collection, which include evidence of this life. Of our thank you for coming. Again, there's a mailing list, find out about more. There's a survey that you're asked. You know, this is the grant money. They need to report out. So be honest, please. Thank you.
We need to have the real.
We need to take a picture.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sounds like Ellington. Yes, Duke.
Right. The dance of it.
And you can put completed surveys on the table as you leave.
Okay, that one, and then, one pass.
Oh, you don't.
The picture.
Okay.
It's available.
All right.
It's David.
Okay.
You want to say?
Okay.
I gotta take a
Keep an eye on the collection, and if anybody has questions, he'll get right with them.
You're like,
So
Wait. You want me to put this? You don't think we should do this?
yay, that's great.
Okay.
No, so there's a vault,
You need one.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so important. Every small thing.
You can open it if you'd like. Okay, that is the first Western Lights. I'll do it. You're right.
So. No, I'm fine. Yeah.
Yes. See you in the next question. Or maybe ask somebody at your house. I've seen it. Yes. There's a picture of you.
Thank you for doing that.
Yep, right here. Did you try?
Thanks, Grace.
Yeah, yeah.
You see this condition of right. Oh, it is. I'm sorry, I'm going to see. Trying to get this thing. What you do? I stayed away. So probably also that.
Years ago, they started.
He actually dedicated the community, which I like. Teaching.
I see it. But tell me
I'm seeing like this. Because that's wow.
Okay. Yeah. I know Mary just mentioned that she didn't have like an open. Oh, yes, that sounds like the guy. Well, not the right person.
So the music represented my brother.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Yeah, so. I would like, yeah, please, like to use the fabric. Thought about you, I read up on it, and I was like, all right.
Okay, we gonna get some books while we're here.
Oh, I didn't say anything about that water. I know you did.
But like, got
Talking to that's what I'm saying. I feel like since I talked to you, I've been thinking, I was like, what was like girl, black audience?
It's not repeating what Black Lucas doing.
No. In Black Embassy, Dorothy. So, but yeah. So the black audience, like, oh, yeah. That over to her, but I wasn't something.
I want to say hello. Hi. And my name is Jennifer. Jennifer, my name is Amir. To meet you. I used to work with you. Everybody knows her. Yeah. Not good for me. Yeah. Yeah. I work with her. Yeah, she actually. No.
Doing that.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I'm right.
Yeah. I was like, oh. Ask them if they have them. No, I don't need it. Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. They were happy with me. Yeah, they had a whole little gas station. Like they was telling us at the black bookstore that, or the black bookstore called the help me. This one there was. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Right?
I do it with I'm more like reading nonfiction.
Okay, good. You're right.
She reads all the time. She reads everything.
Yeah. That allows me to be, it's fun line. Hey,
So anyway, that's what I heard. I was like, okay. What's so close about it? But yeah, the last one was like, already a small.
Including early poem. These are definitely.
Yeah.
An early poem. Francis from London, who lost out in Alabama. She was like,
Never both.
oh, Probably Matt like it like.
Like do like workshop ideas. What do you do for
This though.
some folks? It's like,
I'm gonna, if all the computers, it's all good, I'm familiar. It's like,
So they. It's like.
yeah, you're right. So it's-
And then they kind
Those
of.
people's times on subjects really. Public implementation.
So it's.
Or something in private library. People reading public.
So.
Also.
Yeah. But I'm saying just to go into the month, to like. You know, I know I'm trying to figure that out because I was like, I can't. I really can't. So let's just, I have only, I have 2.5 staff. I got a business manager. I don't know. I'm working with this. So I'm trying to figure that out. But I really want to say, like, I know that we need that. But
I'm looking at before.
So I'm saying that.
You got poetry, you got work by Carolyn.
No.
And
26.
Lita.
Like create this.
Usually about that.
Just jump in. Okay. I'm gonna have
Tuesday.
April 7th.
There was a concept.
I'm telling you, I know last year we did. And we did 50 toes. It's only about the design so I'm able to easily. So I got the full price for those. But I really did 50. And they were, yeah, and we were figuring out what free and they were. It was bad. Like 51st person in line, you know, it's like, okay. Calm down. So yeah. I need that. Who was the designer that was with you? Is that she? Okay, yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm really glad that we. I know, some type of lack of this. So. So, yeah, so there's much one foundation officers are supporting these initiatives. And looking for these solutions to give us 5,000 campfires. Like there's, you know, saying they can do like that. The whole thing. That's what I'm saying. But whenever I'm working on like I'm bringing something that I'm bringing like yeah, I'm not listening to these. Something something's happening. Yeah, I really love seeing it. You do make paintings, and black arts. Like I like first meets.
No, it's not, but I know it's way.
We have seen a lot of yeah.
So, yeah. Especially when it's black.
That's what I'm saying. I'm talking about. I think
Bigger.
yeah, obviously, there's some public.
It's like a, okay, it's not just like a talk, it's more it's fair. Expo, I think for the first fairs. So we did that.
I can't do
So you're
somebody
yeah, black officers. Black officers.
And I see things and I can see anxiety.
Those big ones. Don't do it. That was exactly. Yeah.
So they were down, they coming out of different buildings just to the library. In the day. Yeah. Somebody coming.
Oh.
Show up time. Get this little, you know, piece to get comfortable. It's like I was getting stuff like that. It's always oh, we need to raise money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay. You have your phone, I can
Is your card?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
I know.
Ever since I literally since that night. That's where they say. It's like. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's call that name. Yeah. 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 Something we like.
Okay, now so I'm walking around. I'm gonna make sure no one else gets to it. I'm blocking everybody. I'm blocking, come on. Come on, you're sitting there. I'm blocking for
Yeah. He's pushing me now to because he had a staff car. He said he had heard the way it looks. I'm like, oh. And so both of the tires split, the shocks went out like it just. It was a whole breakdown. But he had, I mean, but he by himself. So that tells me that he was a good friend. But I think you've been driving.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I a little bit worse than and yet I want to not go that that's
Fair.
and I'm
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. Sometimes I'm used to being something. Yeah, I don't like what they're talking about. Like I can say, somebody's. So just yeah, great. I had got Down there, we'll go and rescue this child.
I didn't see it. I mean, I started out.
Yeah. They were all sold out. So I'm good.
Yeah.